I've run into ATVs on that trail there.
You're allowed to have ATVs.
Order. I call this meeting to order. This is Standing Committee on Community Services. I'm John White. I'm the MLA for Glace Bay and Dominion and the Vice Chair for this committee. Today we will hear from presenters regarding the Provincial Emergency Response System. I asked you to please turn off your phones or silence them and put them aside for us. In case of emergency, we'll use the Granville Street exit and go up to Grand Parade. I will now ask committee members to introduce themselves, beginning with MLA McDonald on my left.
Good morning. I'm MLA McDonald from Hantse, sitting in for Melissa Sheehy-Richard.
Hi, good morning. Larry Harrison, MLA for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley.
Good morning, Danielle Barcos, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's. Thank you for being here.
Good morning and welcome. Tom Taggart, MLA for Colchester North.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Susie Hanson, the MLA for Halifax Needham.
Hi, I'm Gary Burrell. I represent Halifax Chebucto.
Good morning. I'm Ben Jessam. I represent Hammonds Plains Lucasville. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your service.
Good morning. Carmen Kerr from Annapolis.
I'd also like to recognize the presence of Chief Legal Counsel on my left, Gordon Hebb, and Committee Clerk on my right, Tamara Nusebi. So I'll go to the table of witnesses. I'll begin with Mr. Mason and asking for just introduction first, and then we'll come back for opening remarks. Paul Mason.
Paul Mason, Executive Director, Nova Scotia Emergency Management Agency.
Rod Nielsen, former President, Fire Service Association in Nova Scotia.
Terry Canning, retired Deputy Fire Chief and First Vice President of the Fire Service Association, Nova Scotia.
Wade Jennings, past Chief of DeBert Fire Brigade and past Vice President of the Fire Service Association in Nova Scotia.
I'm Staff Sergeant Robert Frizzell with the Nova Scotia Criminal Operations Support Unit.
Glen Byrne, I'm responsible for the Operational Communications Center and the Emergency Management for the RCMP.
Thank you, gentlemen. I believe, starting at the left, I believe Paul Mason, you have opening remarks. Please.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to appear today to discuss the Provincial Emergency Response System. Let me begin my short opening remarks by describing what the Nova Scotia Emergency Management Office does, our role before, during, and after emergencies. I want to express my appreciation for the other guests who are among EMO's valued municipal and first response partners. To be clear, EMO is not a first responder. We are a coordinating body that brings together federal, provincial, municipal, First Nation, critical infrastructure, and NGO partners to help Nova Scotians to plan, prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies. EMO contributes to the provincial emergency response system in many ways, and I'll highlight three this morning. Firstly, we operate the provincial 911 system and ensure that the systems and equipment are operational to receive and transfer calls for those requesting assistance. We work closely with 4 public safety answering points that answer 911 calls from across the province. Secondly, EMO coordinates the national public alerting system in Nova Scotia. Our staff issue alerts at the request of organizations responding to emergencies, such as police and municipalities. We've also worked with the RCMP and HPD so that they are able to issue policing-related alerts directly within their jurisdiction. We also provide quarterly training to all partner agencies that can request or issue an alert in order to support their operational readiness. Thirdly, the Incident Management Division at EMO engages our many partners through providing training, conducting exercising, supporting municipal emergency management planning, and activating the Provincial Coordination Center, or PCC, to receive...
Order. Sorry, Mr. Mason. Can I ask you to move closer to the microphone so Ledge TV can pick you up better? So we can hear you, but Ledge TV's having trouble.
Sure.
Thank you.
Activating the Provincial Coordination Center to receive and action requests for assistance during emergency responses. Through these efforts, EMO does its part to help communities become as resilient as possible to disasters. Everyone has to do their part, from the individual to the community to the province to the federal government and to our many partners at each level. The events of the past 5 years have made it abundantly clear that Nova Scotia can expect more frequent and intense natural hazards caused by climate change. In the past, the Provincial Coordination Center might activate once or twice a year. In 2023 alone, the PCC activated for 9 events spanning 41 days. The province realizes that the model that has served Nova Scotians for decades needs to change to reflect this changing risk environment. That is why last month legislation was tabled to create a new Department of Emergency Management and Nova Scotia Guard. This was the first step, and consultations are taking place with key partners to hear their feedback and ideas. Once these important discussions are complete, the next steps will happen this fall with the launch of the department. With every great challenge comes great opportunities, and I'm excited to be part of the work to build a strong and effective Department of Emergency Management and work with many partners to better plan, prepare, respond to, and recover from emergencies here in Nova Scotia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. I believe Mr. Canning and Mr. Nielsen, either one, Mr. Nielsen next. Rod Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to thank the members of the committee for your time today and opportunity for us to be here with you. With the Fire Service of Nova Scotia being a primary first responder to a multitude of emergency types, the topic of our provincial emergency response system is certainly a key component to keeping our responders and the public safer. Any tools the fire service can utilize during an emergency or on the onset of an emergency can assist in earlier and safer mitigation of the incident. When the fire service conducts an operational debrief of a major incident, communications issues are usually at the top of the list. There needs to be a collaborative approach with all our emergency service stakeholders to discuss and provide input on this or any other communication medium used for emergencies. Any system or tool should not be negatively affect another emergency agency either. Lastly, with the fire service possibly being the first on the incident scene and discovering the magnitude of the incident, the governance of the alerting system, and who is authorized to issue an alert is a definite concern of the fire service. In closing, to the chair and the committee members, thank you very much for the opportunity for us to speak today. We are looking forward to collaborating on this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. And Mr. Canning's up next. Oh, no? Sorry.
No.
Opening remarks? No? Mr. Byrne, did you have opening remarks? Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We're very pleased to have been invited to today's committee meeting and welcome questions about our emergency management unit and alerting in Nova Scotia. The RCMP issue emergency alerts via the Alert Already system when there is an ongoing or a police-related incident that may put the public in direct harm. Examples of this would be emergent firearms or weapons-related calls, active shooter, immediate active rapid deployment, and/or terrorism events. We also issue alerts for Amber Alerts, and during a significant and critical incident, our officers continuously assess the situation to determine if and when an alert is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes our opening remarks. So now the floor will be open for questioning. I'll remind everybody to wait until I call your name, recognizing your microphone turns red so Ledge TV can pick you up. I would remind everybody that we're going to do 20-minute round questioning, beginning with the Liberals first, and then follow with the NDP and then the PC Caucus. And following that, we'll figure out how much time we have for lightning round. We'll end questioning altogether at 22:12. As we begin, Liberal Caucus. Sir MLA Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to everyone for being here. So my first questions would be around what's top of mind for me, and that's rescue boats and rescues we're doing on the water. So there was an article by CBC this week speaking about this topic. 84 out of 288 fire departments have motorized boats. They cost around 42 grand up to 150 grand. The critical equipment, I guess my question, last night we had an incident in my community of Granville Ferry. 4 people capsized. They are, we've got, as far as I know, 2 boats out of the Annapolis Royal Department. I don't think we have any other boats in Annapolis County, but I stand corrected if anyone wants to comment on that. And my understanding is they're without side sonar, they're without the FLIR system, And I guess my question would be to the fire services first. Could you explain a bit about these? A, is that true that there are only 2 boats in Annapolis County as far as you're aware? B, is it true that it is missing this equipment? And could you explain that equipment a bit more on these water rescues? Thank you.
Mr. Nielsen.
Yes, to answer the first question, I am unsure of how many would be in Annapolis County, so I can't definitely answer that one, but we could find out for you. Secondly, as far as the missing equipment, there is no standard or anything of what needs to be or should be on those particular boats. And when it comes to each municipality, they're run differently, and each fire department could be run separately inside that. So the focus of most areas and most fire departments is to be able to cover that need with mutual aid departments, so not every individual fire department would have all that equipment. So hopefully that answers your question.
Emily Kerr.
Thank you for that. So my understanding is that the only 2 boats in the county are at Annapolis Royal. It's older equipment. And my understanding is, side sonar would be critical to make sure the efforts are successful. Speaking of response, I know that Annapolis Royal waited hours for other departments. We're certainly thankful for other departments that stepped up and came in as far as Dayspring, Kings County, et cetera. So I guess my question back to fire service and to EMO, would it be in your opinion that more departments, if that's indeed true, should have this equipment on site in future?
Mr. Nielsen?
I would totally agree that it would be advantageous for every fire department to have that type of equipment. Again, it's the how many calls do you get to that nature, how close are you to water, and is it ocean or is it tributaries, rivers, so on. So what does that equipment? And the cost of those units and training and everything else. It goes deeper than just having the equipment.
Emily Kerr.
Thank you. Our entire county lies on the Annapolis River. Parts of our county lie along the whole stretch of the Bay of Fundy, so we certainly are close to water in all parts of our county. We've had another water rescue just a few months ago, so I would say it's more frequent than we would like or anyone would like. I grew up with people being lost in the river and on the ocean. As far as funding, that's a key challenge right now. I know our local department in Annapolis Royal is operating on a $90,000 a year budget. I know 30,000 of that, 1/3, is spent on insurance. I know the other 60 is spent on equipment, training, and everything else, and they can barely keep up. And it would take about 10,000 more breakfasts to even come close to that. So without looking at the county, is there any ask by EMO or within the minister level or beyond for more funding to this department or other departments on this critical equipment that's needed for these water rescues? Thank you.
Mr. Mason?
There's been no ask that's come to EMO for that particular type of equipment. Okay. EMO, our main interface at that more tactical level is, as laid out in the Act, each municipality has to have an emergency management coordinator organization and plan, and they would oversee and coordinate more with those first response assets within their communities. We don't have any dedicated funding streams from EMO for those kinds of assets. I know there are some funding streams, for example, the Emergency Services Provider Fund. There's been a couple of grants disbursements which have gone out to fire departments, ground search and rescue teams over the last couple of years of 10,000, just recognizing some of the challenges we've been through over the past few years. But we haven't received any specific requests for that.
Mr. Canning, did you say you want to add in?
Yeah.
Mr. Canning.
Yeah, I just want to add, I was quite enthused when I heard the Premier's announcement of the Nova Scotia Guard, because one of the and I should say one of the first things that came to my mind that needs to fall along with that is that we need an assessment of the risks and threats across this province. And water rescue is one of those, of course, that fits into that mold. So I think to perhaps partially answer your question and concern, we need to do a thorough risk assessment across the province and find out where do we have these kinds of threats, risks, and then the second part, of course, is how do we deal with them.
MLA Kerr?
I want to just reiterate, I know our local detachment, lots of friends and family at that detachment, they would need more survival suits for last night. They noticed that other boats and other teams coming in, and they're extremely thankful, obviously, were coming in with more modern equipment, equipment that they could have used last night. So with the new EMO division or department, is there any discussion about how that model will change for funding? I know you currently said, Mr. Mason, that currently there's no ask, but does that new model suggest that there will be a new funding streams or new model of departments asking for more support and funding?
Mr. Mason.
I think that's part of the evaluation and consultations will be going on over the next couple of months. The model can be a little bit different from province to province. Some of our contemporaries in other provinces do. It really just depends on kind of the operational posture, for lack of a better term. But I know as that new department kind of moves towards, maturity in the fall, there's discussions underway with a myriad of partners, including first response partners, municipalities, and others. And I think, the purpose of those is to identify those needs, identify the deliverables and the capacities we want to have, and I think that would be part of that discussion.
MLA Kerr.
To Mr. Mason, so as part of that consultation leading to the fall, is that involved each individual department throughout the province, or is that only with a certain representative of each area or community? Could you elaborate on who you're consulting with? As far as I'm concerned about volunteer departments in Annapolis County, we have several of them, thank goodness. But is each chief or deputy chief being consulted in each department, or is Fire Services Association speaking on all those departments' behalf or otherwise? Thank you.
Mr. Mason?
I'm not leading the consultations. I can't speak to the specifics of the strategy, but I can certainly say it's meant to be as broad and inclusive as possible. So it's certainly meant to get as diverse an input from different stakeholders as we can, but I'm not sure exactly to what level of who specifically will be contacted.
MLA Kerr.
Thank you, and I can appreciate that. Could I ask that, Mr. Mason, could you follow up with this committee and give us a more specific breakdown or detail on how that consultation is happening?
Mr. Mason?
Certainly.
MLA Kerr?
Thank you. There was reference to the Nova Scotia Guard. Hopefully I'm not taking from my colleague at all, but I'm freestyling here a bit. And I'm not going to rap. But my questions around the Nova Scotia Guard would be, I know, every department in my backyard is struggling to recruit. There's signs in every parking lot of every department throughout the province. To the fire services and EMO, will the Nova Scotia Guard help with recruitment to our volunteer fire departments? Will there be no effect, or will it take away from that recruitment effort?
Right. Mr. Nielsen?
Yes, time will tell, I guess, because there's so much unknown with the National Guard, or the NS Guard. Ever since COVID, we've struggling more so with recruitment for any volunteers, and especially the fire service. So we are looking for opportunity with that NS Guard to maybe attract people to our service, maybe not as firefighters, but to be able to stand up as experts in their field to join the fire service. That may be one example on how we can accomplish the National Guard, or I keep saying National, NS Guard.
Mr. Mason?
The only thing I would add on to that is, first of all, we're appreciative and acknowledge, the fabulous work done by all of our first response partners, fire departments, GSAR teams, and many other organizations. What we're seeing nationally, in discussions with my counterparts in other provinces, Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and nationally with the federal government led by Public Safety Canada with their efforts to stand up what they refer to as a civilian workforce, is really looking to try to harness that volunteer capacity to the greatest extent possible. I think another potential advantage of the Guard, beyond simply giving Nova Scotians an opportunity to kind of put their skills to use in these events, is a coordinating body, having somebody or an organization that could kind of fulfill that function. Just from my own experience, I've been with the MO since 2012 in different capacities, and I've seen the role and the importance of these volunteer workforces within our response. Starting back in 2016 with the floods in Cape Breton, where Samaritan's Purse did great work in helping to restore some of the homes which were impacted. Now we've seen the Mennonites come in, the Mennonite Builders, Team Rubicon, obviously volunteer and fire departments, and the role of GSAR as well. They're definitely stepping up into this capacity along with their volunteer fire department partners in the civil response capacity. So that coordinating capability, that's what other provinces and the federal government's looking to build out, and that along with harnessing this volunteers, I think is part of the value that it can add to our capacity.
Emily Kerr.
Thank you. This would be the fire services. Is there a general ask that you can comment on behalf of all fire departments of what they're looking for? So locally, medical first responder training is something that's flared up. I know we've organized training at the Annapolis Royal Department. Other chiefs and members are coming into Annapolis Royal to get trained up on that. But and we've put forward a bill to have that training covered rather than come out of the department or out of members. But is there a push, I guess, could you comment on medical first responder training, if that's something that fire services is pushing to have supported, and any other supports that maybe fire services is asking of government? Thank you.
Mr. Nielsen.
Yes, I actually sit on the MFR Stakeholders Committee. That has been an ask of the fire service over 3 years to have it, the initial training and ongoing training covered for MFRs. So, in the last meeting, that they have told us that they are preparing for the budget for the next year to include cost recovery. So what that looks like, I'm not absolutely sure, but that is the ask of the fire service.
Emily Kerr.
Appreciate that update, and I hope to see that in the budget. I guess, could you expand on any other asks of the fire service on behalf of our departments throughout rural Nova Scotia? Thank you.
Mr. Nielsen.
Yes, so one of the programs that was federal was the old JEP program, which allowed them to apply for things for emergencies such as the boats and the things that you talked about earlier. On the national level, which Wade sits on as a representative for Nova Scotia, they're looking for something not exactly JEP, but something related to it and similar to it that would be able to put some of those demands. And then I'd say the other ask is governance. We, the rural fire services, are under the direction of the municipality. So Annapolis, for an example, is a small municipal unit on its own. So, and again, the county so some of that guidance in there, so we could have some consistency on our asks and also funding models or structures.
Emily Kerr.
I'll just wrap up with a comment, but certainly thankful for all of you, thankful to my volunteers in Annapolis County and throughout the province. Good relationships with our EMO management teams on the ground, but looking for more support provincially from this government and federally to help our members on the ground. Talking to members last night and this morning, they're rolling out of bed without any sleep, going back to work. Their kids are asking, where were you last night and why aren't you around this morning? And it's just another example where, I feel like they're going above and beyond what they're expected or asked to do. They never say no, they always show up. but it's getting to the point where when's enough is enough with budget and with their time and everything else. So thank you to everyone, and I'll hand it over to my colleague.
4 minutes left. Honourable Ben Jessom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mason, when were you first made aware of the Nova Scotia Guard initiative, and what, if any, is the mandate aside from consulting with people across the province?
Mr. Mason.
I can't remember the exact date. It was probably in January or February, along those times. With regard to the mandate for consultation, I'm not leading that particular piece. I know, as I noted earlier, it's meant to be broad and as inclusive as possible, but I'm not leading that particular piece of work, so I can't say definitively.
MLA Jessom.
With respect to, I guess, capability to communicate with communities across the province, does the department have an awareness of exactly how capable each corner of the province is? And is there confidence that there is strong capability to connect effectively in every corner of our province? And if so, please explain that. And if not, what is the department doing to ensure that we're consistent and capable from tip to tip?
Mr. Mason.
What we do at EMO to kind of ensure that kind of continuous improvement, for lack of a better term, is we do review the municipal emergency management plans from all municipalities every 2 years, just to ensure that they're meeting the legislative requirements of the Act. So that's how we establish that baseline. And we provide training and exercise opportunities. This year we've got approximately 60 training and exercise events. Some are smaller, some are large province-wide events. So that's how we kind of promote kind of the adoption of best practices and a consistent service delivery model.
Mr. Koenig.
Yes, I'd just like to add, with respect to the communications piece, MLA Jessom, that again, when I first heard about the Nova Scotia Guard possibility or potential, that was one of the first questions that came to my mind, is the communications piece, because clearly communications, and when I say communications, I'm talking about two-way communications, obviously, but that's a field that I've worked in for the past 20-some years, and that is a critical role to any kind of response capability, and that's, I expect to be on the consultation with the Nova Scotia Guard group through the Fire Service Association, but that's one of the points that I certainly will be raising, is how do we achieve that piece of the puzzle, because it's absolutely vital if we're going to see any kind of effective response that we have communications. And I don't know the answer at this point in time, but I know it's a question that has to be addressed, for sure.
MLA Jessom with 1 minute left.
Mr. Mason, is there any inclination to modernize, update the, I'll say, the legislative requirements that municipal units are required to meet? The example that I can think of is our capital city HRM did not have the capability to put on a press conference when in the middle of a wildland fire in rural Halifax. And to me, that, like, in theory, our most capable, maybe not capable, but most endowed area of the province doesn't have the capability to run a press conference and communicate with the public. So to me, that's a clear example of something that that calls for modernization in our legislative requirements on our municipalities, and funding to help them make up any gaps that we're asking them to step up and modernize. Can you respond to that?
Not now, it's time ran out. Order. NDP Caucus, who's up first? Emily Burrell?
Yes, but would you like to respond to my colleague's question first before I go ahead?
Yeah.
Mr. Mason?
Sure. Excuse me. I guess to your point, we've seen these type of large-scale events like the fires we had in the Halifax area and the Barrington-Shelburne area, the floods that we've experienced, the more recent large snows. So we're seeing these large events here in Nova Scotia, and unfortunately, we're seeing them really all over North America and certainly all over Canada. There's been a number of jurisdictions that have updated their legislation over the past 4 or 5 years, and that really looks at, kind of my earlier points, looking at your operational posture, who's doing what are the roles of the various levels of government. When you look at emergency management all across North America, and even within our current legislation, it starts with the municipality, it goes to the province, and then in certain circumstances will reach back to the federal government. Those consultations, will help inform what that legislation looks like when it comes forward in the fall. And I think, the discussions that will happen, the cross-jurisdictional, that will help inform, what the deliverables for the various partners are going forward.
Thank you, Emily Burrell. Your first question.
I wanted to ask a couple of questions of the RCMP about follow-up with the Mass Casualty Commission recommendations, which certainly dovetail a lot with the subject we're dealing with today. One of them was that there should be, both from the force and from EMO, a review of call taker recruitment and training. Can you say where we are in response to this recommendation? Is the review in train? Is it in place, or is it in a planning stage?
Yeah, I can speak.
Mr. Byrne?
Yeah, thank you. The RCMP has a extremely robust training curriculum for the RCMP call takers and dispatchers. It's a standardized process. I received the same training as a dispatcher call taker that's in British Columbia or Alberta or Newfoundland. It's a very long process. And usually takes anywhere from the time we get somebody in the door, it's anywhere from 9 months to a year before they're actually signed off and trained as meeting all the requirements of RCMP call taker and dispatcher. And then in addition to that, EMO Nova Scotia provides us the 911 training. I know following the incidents of April 2020, our Operational Policy Center in Ottawa has conducted a review of our training, and it's still under review, and they make enhancements as necessary.
Mr. Burrell. Emily Burrell, sorry.
Thank you. Can you give us any sense of when that review might be completed and some of the things that we might be able to expect in response to the recommendations from the Commission?
Mr. Byrne?
Yeah, some of the things are around our protocols and procedures that we're bringing done. For example, the inclusion of alerting and alert messaging, the enhancement of interoperability with our policing partners, the use of plain language, like our radio communications, plain language versus use of 10 codes and encryption when working with external partners such as like fire services and things like that. So I think like that side of it is done. I know provincially for my center, we've done we completed an extremely detailed review of all of our procedures and protocols around questioning for dispatchers and call takers. Our 911 procedures we reviewed, and we updated a lot of those procedures immediately following the instance of April 2020.
Emily Burrell.
And a little bit related, I guess, to the same review is this question that has been brought so much into the front and center by the Commission, the question of timely warnings being issued. So I wanted to ask, in the time, in the 4 years intervening, what improvements have been made in the RCMP's warning protocols, and what are some of the specific changes that have been made, improvements that have been made in response to the terrible events of 4 years ago?
Mr. Byrne.
Yeah, there was a lot of changes with alerting. We, the RCMP in Nova Scotia, we conducted a detailed review of alerting. There was, we created both, we worked with the national partners, we created both national and provincial, or divisional, what I would say is divisional policy around different types of alerts, such as vulnerable missing person alerts, dangerous persons alert, and the serious incidents alerts. We also conduct a lot of internal education and training around alerting. We conduct monthly tabletop exercising around public alerting. And that's with not just our senior managers, but our detachment commanders, operations NCOs, frontline constables, and that's been ongoing for I would say close to a year now. And they're scheduled, like I say, we schedule them monthly, and they'll continue. Enhancements, like I say, we created the policies around it. We also have we've embedded, and we're constantly thinking about public safety now during dealing with any critical or significant incident. In fact, we engage our strategic communications unit very early in the process, even before an incident would turn into a critical incident, right at the very beginning of an incident when it's managed by our responders and our risk managers that are in our dispatch center. We're engaging strategic communications right there. So alerting and messaging to the public, it's at the forefront, and right from the time the file goes or starts until it's over. We've also, in addition to that, the delegation, there were multiple levels of authorization to send an alert since April 2020. And in those policies that we created, senior managers has delegated that authority to issue an alert down to my risk managers. That's my staff surgeons that sit in 24/7 and oversee the incidents. So they delegated that down. And again, we provide that training to them. They have the most current and relevant information regarding what's taking place on the ground. So they're given the authority to issue those alerts right away. And again, we, as of I have 12 of my risk managers and alternate risk managers trained to issue those alerts, as well as myself. So we can issue an alert rather quickly, but we want to make sure that we have the relevant information to keep both the public and our members safe. So.
MLA Burrow.
Well, thank you for that explanation. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Mason, too, about, from EMO's point of view, some follow-up in response to some of the recommendations of the Commission. One of those was that to establish a phone line and a website that community members could use to report all sorts of information, not necessarily very specific burning information, but also maybe some that might be peripheral, and also that there would be ways through this to get further information about responding to a public warning. So I'm wondering, is there where does EMO stand on a rollover response to this recommendation?
Mr. Mason.
Thank you. Yeah, there's 9 recommendations that kind of relate to EMO. Some are in partnership with DOJ. That one specifically, I believe, is recommendation P21. We're meeting regularly with Department of Justice and our policing partners on that specific recommendation, and looking to develop some options to move up to fulfill that recommendation. It's really looking to strike a balance so that it can be operationally deployed quickly, but at the same time kind of deliver that kind of ongoing access which you alluded to. So that, along with the other 8 recommendations, are moving forward. We've completed 1 thus far, and the others are all underway. And we meet regularly, as I noted, with DOJ and police, but also with the larger governmental group moving those recommendations forward.
MLA Burrow.
And yet the core recommendation that there would be a phone number to call, as one might call the power company when the power went out, doesn't seem complex. Is this something that we're going to be having in place pretty soon, or are we looking at a long process?
Mr. Mason.
We expect to have it in place soon. It's under discussion with our partners at DOJ and police, but I take your point. It's not complex necessarily to roll out the phone numbers. We're looking to get that, along with all of our other MCC recommendations, executed as quickly as possible.
Emily Burrow.
Another one of the EMO-related recommendations that, at least from the distance of someone like me, doesn't seem that complex, is the one about the public education campaign to increase awareness of the public, and particularly I think the idea was in schools. What is a warning? What is the character of warning? How ought you to respond to a warning? What is this all about? So where are we in an EMO response to this recommendation of moving the world of warnings closer to the center of public consciousness in the province?
Mr. Mason.
Yeah, I believe that's recommendation P22. That one is underway as well. We've been meeting with Department of Justice on that one, and we're looking at different options on how we can move that forward. Obviously, there's really two key deliverables that we would see as related to that recommendation. One is obviously developing the materials and the strategy. The second phase would really be the execution. So how do you kind of socialize those along in the general populace? So that work is underway.
Emily Burrow.
Thanks. And then just following up on some of the things that Mr. Byrne was saying, thinking about it from EMO's point of view, what work is being done to improve the standard operating procedures for the emergency alert system from EMO's point of view?
Mr. Mason.
Sorry. What we've done with regard to the alert standard operating procedures, our initial standard operating procedures were developed back in 2017. After the tragic events of 2020, we revitalized those standard operating procedures and really looked at some best practices in other provinces, particularly Saskatchewan. So we used those to update our standard operating procedures, I believe, in 2021. Like any of our programs, we're always finding things that can be tweaked or improved, but the main way that we kind of ensure, to use the term I noted earlier, operational readiness, is through regularly engaging with our partners on that platform. As was noted earlier, it's something that can be used, and needs to be used quickly when an event may happen. So what we've done specifically beyond that is we've hired a dedicated person who's our Alert Ready program manager, who kind of facilitates quarterly training with all of our partners. So whether it be police agencies, municipalities, First Nations, we have a quarterly session with all of them just to ensure that their operational readiness is sharp. It's a shared process when it comes to the issuance of an alert. There's the request that comes in, and then that's executed in partnership with the Provincial Radio Communications section, for lack of a better term, in our office, with the exception of RCMP and HPD, which have direct access and issue their alerts independently.
Emily Burrow.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask the fire service about response to one of the other recommendations. I'm thinking about the encrypted mobiles. From your point of view, is the training that's being provided adequate for the new equipment, or are we behind on that? And where are we on the rollout as far as having it in all the hands it needs to be in, the encrypted equipment?
Mr. Koenig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll handle that one, having been in that business for, as I said, roughly 20 years. The rollout of the equipment is on schedule for this coming fall. The province has been extremely generous in the plan to replace existing equipment and in fact, enhance the inventory of equipment in the hands of the fire service quite significantly. As far as the training program, as far as I'm aware, it has not been developed at this point, but is in that process. And all I can say with respect to that is that I was involved in the rollout of the training program, the delivery of equipment and training program In 2001, the first time the province supported the fire service in radio communications equipment, and again in 2013 when we did the second generation. And I have every reason to think that the same sort of protocol and process will occur this time around. It was a very comprehensive process that required the training be received before the equipment was received. So I think I have no reason to think that same thing won't happen this time around, I guess.
MLA Burrell.
And where are we on the rollout from a physical point of view? What percentage of our departments, roughly, have got the equipment in hand?
Mr. Canning?
At this point, all of the fire services in Nova Scotia have the interoperable TMR equipment of the current generation. The next generation, which I'm not sure what the term is going to be used, whether it's TMR3 or whatever, but nevertheless, at this point in time, none of it is in the hands of the fire service. The natural resources, I believe, has been transferred to the new system, and I think they are probably the only department at this point in time. As I say, the fire service is scheduled for the fall, and as far as I'm aware, we're on schedule to get there.
Emily Burrell.
Thank you. And I'd like to go back to the question that you touched on a little bit with Mr. Kerr earlier about the fire service's concerns about training. So I think of the notice that the service put out earlier this year about the concern about funding, that whatever the name is of that fund, the insurance levy that has been used, that the insurance levy that has been in place for the last 10 or dozen years to fund training isn't going to cut the mustard in terms of the current level of training that's required, and the fire service put out the word that this was a concern. So at a time when adequate training in the fire service is so much in the public light through the Mass Casualty Commission, I wonder where this stands. Does the concern that you articulated earlier this year, does this still stand? Or has it been adequately addressed? Or where are you about this?
Mr. Canning?
That's an interesting question. And it's interesting to me in that I'm chairing the committee of the Fire Service Association that administers that fund. The situation is that was a program that was introduced in 2012 to accommodate the fact that fire services respond regularly to motor vehicle collisions and fires with no compensation. We don't get any tax revenue from highway vehicles or highways, and so this was a program that was put in place to generate funds from vehicle insurance policy. It generated initially somewhere in the ballpark of $325,000 to $350,000 a year, and consistently over the first 8 to 10 years, I want to say, was underutilized by the fire service. So every year we actually experienced a surplus. For whatever reason, I think there's numerous possible reasons, one of them being pent-up demand because of the pandemic and so on. In 2023, all of a sudden, the providers of training and the consumers of training, fire service volunteers, came out of the woodwork. And before the end of 2023, we were actually in a deficit situation and had to start telling the providers of the training that we simply had no money to pay them until the new calendar year. In early 2024, we had a number of fairly extensive training programs run January, February of 2024. And by the 1st of March, again, we were out of money for the 2024 funding. That's, in my mind, that's a good thing in that we have finally reached a point where the fire services, the volunteers, recognize the availability and are taking advantage of it, because that was a challenge every year when we reported to the Minister of Finance on the status of the fund. we had to say, well, we're trying to spend the money, we're trying to find programs that the fire service wants. I report at every meeting of the Fire Service Association Board of Directors where we're at and request from them input as to what they need in their respective communities and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, it paid off.
Sorry, Mr. Canning. Order. NDP Caucus time has run out. Back to the PC. Emily Barkhouse first. Emily Barkhouse.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here and your service. I'm pretty lucky. I come from the municipal level of government before I came to provincial, so I understand quite a bit. So I want to talk about the Nova Scotia Guard, and my first question is for Mr. Mason, which is why is the Nova Scotia Guard needed?
Mr. Mason.
Thank you. I would kind of just go back to my initial point that I was noting probably a few minutes ago. We're seeing the role played by volunteer agencies in our emergency response capacity becoming more and more significant, over the last few years. As I noted, it's really starting with the Cape Breton floods back in 2016. That's when we started to have a lot more of these NGOs kind of come to the fore. And once again, we're not seeing that just here in Nova Scotia. We're seeing that really right across the country. So I think the value proposition from my perspective, from an emergency management planning and response and recovery perspective that the Guard can bring to the table is really, firstly, as I said, really providing a mechanism for people who maybe aren't currently engaged in some of our volunteer organizations to find a point of entry into either those organizations or into another capacity to assist in that response. And also the second deliverable is really the coordinating capacity. When we're having these large-scale events, you've got multiple NGOs and different volunteer organizations deployed sometimes in multiple parts of the province. Having the ability to have those more effectively tracked and those resources kind of pre-identified, and then to coordinate their response when we're actually in the midst of an event, I think the Guard can help fulfill those two deliverables.
Emily Barkhouse.
So then why start up a new one? Why not just add more concentrated resources to EMO, or to the current EMO, I should say?
Sure.
Mr. Mason.
I think, it really goes back to, once again, the growth of the events that we've seen here, really from climate change. And there's other risks, of course, that are out there as well, whether they be supply chain, cyber, those types of things. But even just in the events that we've actually experienced, EMO, certainly in my view, effectively performed its tasks over the past few years. But I think it's become apparent, as I kind of noted in my opening remarks, that with the increased scale and severity and prolonged response of these events, the capacities of the organization, I think a departmental level makes sense. And I think that increased capacity, along with some of the new legislation and the Guard and some of these other functionalities that are coming to the fore, will better position us as a province to respond to these kinds of things.
Emily Barkhouse.
Thank you. So then, how will Nova Scotia Guard help address resource shortages during major events or emergencies?
I think,
Mr. Mason.
I always forget. I think it really comes down to I guess to build on my earlier point, to having as effective as a possible understanding of the resources you have available via the pre-planning aspects of the Guard development, and then being able to effectively deploy them where they're needed during an event. And a good example with that would be, the very significant snowfall in Cape Breton and Pictou counties and through those areas of the province. We work closely with GSAR teams, volunteer firefighters, Team Rubicon, and others to do over 1,400 wellness checks for people who needed assistance. I think that's an area where the Guard can strengthen us.
Emily Barkhouse.
Fans, if they could kind of put in their input on that question as well. Mr. Canning?
Mr. Canning.
Surprise.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just reiterate the question, please.
MLA Barkhouse.
How will the Nova Scotia Guard help address resource shortages during major emergencies?
Mr. Canning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's one of the $64,000 questions that's in front of us. Again, as I mentioned earlier, when I first heard about the inception of the Nova Scotia Guard, that was one of the first questions that jumped to my mind, is how is this new structure going to assist the existing emergency response structures, most of them volunteer in Nova Scotia. And I have spoken extensively with Minister Rushton and a few others about that question. They assure me that they are going to consult with us and make sure that that happens. I participated in a round table, or a town hall, online town hall meeting with the Premier roughly 2 weeks ago. And again, he assured us that this is an ongoing concern and plan to deal with. I tend to be the eternal optimist, and I guess I'm going to take the position at this point that the concept is a good one. The possibilities that it presents are positive for the province of Nova Scotia, and I'm hoping that we can work together, cooperate, and make it happen. I have some serious and grave concerns that we might be jumping into something without considering all of the ramifications of it. But again, I think we can prevail and make something good come out of it. I'm looking forward to that possibility, I guess I'll say.
Emily Barkhouse.
Before I hand it off, I will say that I think this as well, that it's going to be something good. The Tantallon fires, you have never seen, like, Nova Scotians are beautiful, beautiful people, giving and loving, but when there's an emergency, they step up. And this is a great opportunity for Blue Nosers to step up and find out where they fit in, because you have people that could be doing something, but they're folding clothes for donations, right? And so this is a great resource of our wonderful population. But I will pass this over to MLA Harrison.
MLA Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank all of you for, number one, your desire to bring this forward, to make sure that we are going to be safer in the future with emergency response, disaster mitigation. My questions are going to be for the role the federals may have. Do we have a federal organization that's similar to FEMA in the U.S. that addresses disaster response and emergency management?
Mr. Mason?
Yeah, we do not. Basically, in the United States, there's, I'm sure most of us are familiar, they have a large department called Homeland Security, and there's many agencies which come under that, the FBI, a number of others, and FEMA does as well. Here in Canada, we have Public Safety Canada. There's also a Department of Emergency Management, which is very closely aligned with Public Safety Canada. There's not the capacity at the federal level that they have with the FEMA. Now, what we can do and what we've done here is we've been able to work closely with them. We have agreements in place under the umbrella of the New England governors and East Coast premiers, where we work with our American counterparts in the New England states. And through those relationships, we've been able to leverage some of their FEMA training. We've had FEMA people come in last November and deliver training to provincial staff. We're looking to do that again next November and involve some of our municipal partners as well. There's also a great wealth of documentation and training materials that FEMA makes available to us. In some cases, we have to rework that a bit to kind of Canadianize it a little bit. It might refer to an American statute or what have you, so we'll have to input the Canadian equivalent. And of course, FEMA has operational capacities as well. Basically, they can deploy incident management team and other resources into states which have had impacts. So I know we've had discussions with our federal counterparts on that. They're very focused on the civilian workforce capacity, but they are evaluating the American model and some of the other European models to build out some of their first response capacities as well.
Mr. Koenig?
Okay, I sit on the...
Sorry, Mr. Jennings.
I'm on the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs and the National Fire... National Advisory Council. One thing that we are asking of the federal government is to set up a version of the National Fire Administration. So it's we're looking to get something set up to try and get information out and a way of gathering information and keeping records of calls and stuff. So,
MLA Harrison.
The Public Safety Canada, you want to elaborate a bit on the role or relationship that EMO has with them?
Mr. Mason.
Public Safety Canada is really our federal counterpart. So basically, they do drive some national initiatives. So, for example, Alert Ready, they're kind of the federal lead on that functionality. They administer the Disaster Financial Assistance Program. So when we have a large event, that's a federal program which the provinces kind of administer, so we'll work with them. And they are working on a number of other functionalities meant to kind of position Canada to respond more effectively to some of these unprecedented events we've seen. Civilian workforce is probably foremost among that. But really what they serve is our federal window into the larger federal government. The only other thing I would add is when we have a request for assistance. So if we have a large event here and let's say we feel we need additional federal, it might be people, it might be specific assets. There's a request for assistance process that we complete. It goes forward to the federal government. Lots of times people think it directly goes to the military, but the way that the federal government kind of actions that is they'll take it into an entity they have called the Government Operations Center, and then they'll look at the request and they'll look around the various assets the federal government has, and then they'll offer us what they think is the best fit. It could be military, it could be the Red Cross, it could be Coast Guard. It really depends on the ask, but those are the main interfaces we have with Public Safety Canada.
MLA Harrison.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Financially, though, the public, do they really give a lot to that program? What relationship with that, Public Safety Canada?
Mr. Mason.
There's no financial relationship. They don't provide any funding. So, for example, to your earlier question around FEMA, FEMA provides a large spectrum of different grants to both states and municipalities to try to encourage emergency preparedness by providing funding, or it might be an IT platform. There's nothing like that from Public Safety Canada, with the exception of the Disaster Financial Assistance Program. As was noted earlier by some of my fellow panelists, is they used to provide the JET program, which was a great program that was available. We would kind of administer and flow it down to first response agencies. I believe that was canceled around 2014 or so. But beyond that, there's not a financial relationship.
MLA Harrison.
I'm going to hand it over to my colleague now.
MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks all for being here. I just wanted to make a couple comments before I started based on the comments from my colleague across the way, which is, I just want to be clear, and this is going to go really to FSANS who wants to. Fire is dealt with by the municipalities, not by the provincial government through legislation. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Mr. Nielsen.
Yes, that's totally true. And right now, our focus of FSANS is on governance and that very issue. Also, our committee, Joint Municipal Service Committee, is also, that is their focus currently. And again, with the numerous different requests that fire service looks after for a multitude of different types, that is definitely a concern, yes.
MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for me, I represent 13 volunteer fire departments, 14 if you include one First Nations. And I know that I would just suggest that municipalities should be talking to each other. because the municipality of East Hants a number of years ago actually created a training fund so that their departments could access that and get money out of that. They also created a fund for the insurance. So all the building insurances actually are shared amongst all the municipalities. I would submit that it would be better for them to be talking amongst their municipal funders and see what's been able to do. I know that, for example, in East Hants, there's been at least 2 training grounds created, enhanced, tens and thousands of dollars a year paid for MFR or different training so that they're not having to do that. So I just figured I'd give those comments off onto it and just highlight one thing since it was raised, and I know because Mr. Nelson's had the pleasure or the bane of during my tenure as a fire sergeant, have me on scene. Mutual aid agreements. So mutual aid agreements, normally we have to do up and list, here's all of our apparatus we have when we come to a call. Municipalities have it. I think they're shared with all the departments. And I'm sure FSANS has it also. I'm just wondering, am I correct that like what each department has, there's a list so that you can actually go through and your mutual aid agreements help, and Mr. Canny's telling me no. So I guess who has it after they do it? Because I know we submit it to the municipality and to our association in East Hants. So I think Mr. Nelson and Canyon are going to answer this for me, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Nielsen.
Yes. With the different municipalities across the province, I can suggest that there's probably as many different variations of that as there are municipalities. So one thing that has been key is we stood up a committee after the various reports, and it's called the Nova Scotia Joint Municipal Fire Service Committee, which has representatives on it from the Association of Municipalities, the administrators, in this case currently it'd be Municipal Affairs, Fire Marshal's Office, and so we have elected officials. So we have a very good representation across the table. And these are the topics that come up, and they're basically we're not consistent across the province on how the municipalities roll out. And there are some people, advisors from the provincial government, that try and go around and make it more consistent. But we have seen a continuous change of these people, and that's not helping the system to be able to get everybody educated on how it works. Looking at the NS GERD, that suppository or of information repository. You know what I meant.
I know what you meant.
It may feel like that sometimes. That I'm looking forward to that being part of this NS GERD, that there will be some sort of database that we can extract. So I can speak on behalf of Colchester. We do not have that list. It's done by the association, not by the municipality.
Mr. Canning, you want to add to that?
Yes, I just elaborate a little bit. Again, as I've said before, I'm at risk of being a broken record. This is another one of the concerns that came to my mind when I heard about the creation of the Nova Scotia Guard, the fact that one of the promises, if you will, that it presents is an inventory of resources. Well, that's wonderful. That's absolutely essential. But we certainly don't have it today. As Chief Nielsen says, we have it within the municipal level, in our case created by the Colchester Firefighters Association, not the municipality. It would be shared amongst the fire service in Colchester County, but I don't think it would be shared beyond the boundaries of Colchester County unless there was a direct relationship between a fire service in Colchester and a fire service in East Hants, as an example, or one in Pictou County, one of the neighboring fire services sort of thing. So I think that's one of the challenges and opportunities for the Nova Scotia Guard, is to create and maintain that inventory of resource. And I want to emphasize the importance of maintain, because in the 35 years that I've been in the volunteer fire service, the one consistent thing is the inability to keep an accurate list of resources. They change virtually overnight. I can't count the number of times that we've dealt with a Byrne fire, for example. And with the Byrne fire, as you may know, Mr. MLA McDonald, you basically have to tear the barn apart to extinguish the hay that's in it. And to do that, you need an excavator. And to get an excavator, you have to have a flatbed trailer. And to do that, you have to know where to find those. And the damn things move all over the province. So that's the challenge that I see with keeping an accurate record of resources. They change so consistently that somebody is going to have to be tasked with maintaining that almost on a daily basis. And so I think it'd be a wonderful tool to have at our hands, but it's going to require some investment in time and effort for sure.
Thank you. 6 seconds. Thank you on his behalf. So for the next round, we have 10 minutes each. That'll finish us up around 11:40. MLA Jessam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our guests from the RCMP, I'm wondering about kind of the back end of an emergency situation, and to put it exactly, we experienced a wildfire in the Upper Tantallon area. A decision was made by the RCMP not to advance or to move forward with criminal charges. The decision was made in the fall. It was only through an access to information request that the community found out that there wouldn't be criminal charges laid with respect to the cause of that wildfire. I'm wondering, we're here to talk about responses and we're talking about communication with, and for me, this is one of the most important questions that my community is asking me, and I think an important question for us all to reflect on is what is the RCMP's responsibility with respect to reporting this type of a decision to the public, through the chair?
Mr. Frizzell.
Yes, thank you. So the RCMP's principal role would be to gather that evidence or information to see if it would support charges. We then take that information and share it with public prosecution, which is an independent body. At the end of the day, there's kind of two tests to determine if charges will be laid. The threshold, the first test for the RCMP, is reasonable probable grounds to believe it happened. That's kind of the 50 plus 1, if you will, for us. Crown, or public prosecution, then has their test is the likelihood of conviction. So they'll go and look at it in total, and they have a bunch of different things that I can't really speak to because that's them, and then they'll determine if they want to go through with charges. Often for larger files, such as this one that you mentioned there, we will start to collaborate with Crown right at the very onset. So at the very first stage, we'll start to share the information of the evidence that we've gathered, and then collaboratively kind of determine whether charges are appropriate or not. It comes into a tricky part of some of that information might be restricted or protected because it might be sensitive. We'll use our system to determine if charges, and Crown will do theirs. And at the end of the day, whoever decides not to lay the charges is primarily responsible for communicating that and sharing that with the public. Often there's a lot going on behind the scenes or information that we can't share that made part of the determination. And we try and work through that and be as transparent as we can and give all the information that we can give, but often that can sometimes cause confusion or a disconnect simply because we can't share all the information on why. And we'll strive to work on that and give clear messaging, but that's just unfortunately the reality of the justice system, like the criminal charges.
MLA Jessam.
Is it possible for you to how can I phrase this? Is it possible for you to provide the committee with a response to the request to make somebody available to answer questions on how this decision was concluded to the public? This is you know, we've had an amazingly, profoundly terrible year at home, and people want to know what happened here and how people got to that conclusion. And in terms of, like, we're here to talk about communicating with the public and with interagency communications and communicating with the public. Can you please provide the committee with a response to a request for the RCMP to make themselves available to answer questions on how that determination was made?
Mr. Frizzell.
Yeah, we can definitely be committed to try and help clarify that. The hiccup that I see on the onset is that there will be, like I mentioned, some information that can't be shared even with the committee or members of Parliament. So that has hurdles that we can try and look to overcome for sure, just due to the level of that privileged information. And number two is that the decisions aren't made in isolation. There is that public prosecution part as well. So I can't speak on their behalf that they would be willing to. I think you'd have to reach out and clarify with them. But they'll be a part of both of those voices having a key piece of that puzzle to give you a full picture, if that's even possible. So we can definitely, I commit to looking into that and reaching back to the committee, but there would be a lot of legalities and technicalities that we'd have to deconflict for that to go ahead.
Emily Jessom.
Thank you, Mr. Staff Sergeant Frizzell. I appreciate that there are some intricacies that will have to kind of be looked at before coming back to the table, but I just wanted to get the ball rolling, and I thank you for that response and that commitment. The present, the past budget for the Emergency Management Office reflects a decrease in funding. The minister at the time, during estimates, related that to an amortization of the 911 system, in, I guess, representing that it's depreciated over time, therefore less. It represents less on the books. For a government that has introduced the Nova Scotia Guard, a newly branded or branding exercise for the EMO without, you know, an increased budget to execute this as a priority. How does that stack up through the chair, Mr. Mason?
Mr. Mason.
Thank you. I guess my thought on it would be, you know, as the consultation process rolls forward and the department kind of forms as to what it will look like when it kind of comes to full fruition in the fall, certainly my expectation would be that, you know, whatever the budget requirements are of that new model would obviously need to be kind of part of that, you know, whether that be staffing costs, whether there potentially could be any programs associated, that would be informed by the consultations, and then go forward be how I would expect that to proceed. But obviously, I only have input in certain aspects of that, but that'd be my thought.
Emily Jessom.
Through the chair, what is the best way for members of the public to get involved in, or elected officials, members of the public, to get involved in that consultation process? Big part of the response to Portapique and the recommendations in the Mass Casualty Commission was to reinforce and help coordinate the voices and capacity of local entities. And while I think our local emergency responders of all stripes and professions are a good first, you know, pool for consulting with, probably the best. But I think that at least the experience that I had was that there was a lot of unofficial leaning on local organizations, I think the Lions Club, the homeowners associations that were charged to like it was a full-time job on top of their full-time jobs to give out resources to community members. So I'd like to know, as we move through the summer, to consult on what we hope will be a fruitful outcome. How do these local, I'll say unofficial organizations get involved in this consultation process so that we don't miss opportunities?
23 seconds left, Mr. Mason.
Sure. I know that there's been steps already taken where people interested can call 211 if they're interested in joining the Guard. As I said, I'm not leading the consultation piece. I've had some involvement. I would expect that there'll be more communication and more availability for people who are interested, both in the consultation and the Guard generally, in the coming weeks.
Order. Time has run out again. Is it MLA Hanson I see prepping there? MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for EMO. Misinformation spreads when individuals unknowingly share inaccurate information. We saw this happen with the recent wildfires, and with some false information being spread about lifting evacuation orders. So many were relying on privately run Twitter accounts or folks in community for updates because it was the only place to find clear and timely updates. So my question is, what is being done now to ensure better information is being shared, and making sure that we don't continue that same process if another emergency happens again?
Mr. Mason.
Thank you. What we're looking at, certainly things within the purview of EMO, is primarily through our alerts website and what have you. So when we have large-scale events like the wildfires or snowfalls or floods or what have you, the province stands that website up. We work closely with Communications Nova Scotia, and that, along with the government X, or formerly Twitter account and what have you, are probably the best places to get information, at least from the provincial perspective. Depending upon the scope of the event, it might be an event which is fairly contained within a specific municipality, and obviously they would be speaking to their citizens as well through their various channels, and our people at Communications Nova Scotia would work with those municipal reps to try to ensure that messages are aligned and accurate. There's certainly, and we've seen it a lot during events, there's a lot of stuff that circulates on social media. People post pictures from several years ago and position it as if it's actually happening now. The best advice I can give is to follow trusted government sources when you're in the midst of those events. It's where you'll get the best information.
MLA Hanson.
I wanted to ask a question to Fire Services, just to kind of reiterate what my colleague was asking about funding. Is the VILF, I believe, is it? And you said there was a deficit for 2023. So what does that mean now for training opportunities or continuing the work that is being done? What does that mean now for members? But has the provincial government stepped up and given funding to be able to provide that training or to help you through that?
Mr. Koenig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The short answer is the provincial government has not done anything aggressively or immediately. There was no intent. This is not taxpayers' dollars that we're playing with. So there was no expectation on the part of the Fire Service Association that the government should step up and do anything. We were simply the administrators of a levy fund that comes from insurance premiums. The one thing that we have approached the province to do, and we've been assured that they will take it under consideration, is to increase the levy from 50 cents per insurance policy per year to $1 per insurance policy per year. So effectively doubling the resource, if you will. As I say, we've made that request. We've received acknowledgement that the request was received, and hopefully we'll see the increased funding, but I have no commitment at this point, of course.
MLA Hanson.
If I might just add,
Mr. Kane.
the rate is actually established in the act that created the fund. And so it's not a simple matter of the governor and council making the change. It has to go to the legislature and be amended. So it's a bit more problematic than I had hoped it would be. But
Thank you. Emily Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say, is that in legislation? Because if it is, it shouldn't be problematic if we know that there's funding that's necessary to be able to lift up the services that we so need and that are truly beneficial to every part of our province. So absolutely, I thank you for clarifying that, because I can take that back and we can have a discussion about that. My next question, how many more minutes do I have, Mr. Chair? 5?
5:40.
Okay, this might take a couple. So I wanted to say, just in case I don't get to say this during my time, because as we know, time goes very quickly in this room. But I wanted to say, I want to thank each and every service member, each and every emergency service, our RCMP, all of our members across this province that are doing amazing work. A lot of them during their volunteer time, and a lot of them doing it because they love their community and they love the things that they do to help uplift their community. I want to say that when we heard about the Nova Scotia Guard, it was a surprise to us as well. We had no idea that that was even a consideration, a thought. And our first initial reaction was, have we contacted the service providers that are doing the great work right now, and how are we lifting them up to be able to help incorporate their services to continue helping more Nova Scotians. So I say that to preface that I know the Emergency Management Office is doing amazing work in their own right, but we just talked about how there's gaps in communication. We just talked about how there's necessary funding needed. We just talked about how we don't know what is it? We don't know the parameters around the Nova Scotia Guard as yet, but we're announcing things without knowing anything about what that looks like yet. And then we're also not consulting the folks that are doing this work in the province initially before an announcement is made. So my thought is, with EMO rolling out this process, I'm concerned that when we make announcements about putting forward a new idea, which will definitely be something great for this province, if it's done properly with the proper consultation, working with those that have the skill set. I'm concerned that, as my colleague said, there's no funding in the next budget to be able to offset that. So we mention this all the time, is that we're asking folks to do this work and give input and consult and do all of these things, but there's no budget behind that. So I'm just concerned that is there an ask possibly from EMO to the finance minister, to the government specifically, to be able to help get all of the things that needs to be done to get this process off the ground in the right way, with the proper feedback and the proper consultation.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you.
I know that was
How I would, I guess my understanding on how this will move ahead, and certainly, the part that I would play with it, as I said, these consultations will roll out over the next couple months. They will help inform what the final version of the Department of Emergency Management looks like. And obviously, depending upon, what that structure, those capabilities, anything around potential grants, if that's within or out of scope, that will help inform what the budgetary needs are for that department. So that's how I would see that going, and really being informed by these consultations over the next couple months.
Emily Hanson with 2:20 left.
Great. Thought I had a little bit of time. Okay. So I would like to, and I want this to be in consideration, to make this public for all folks to be able to give input, but even to share their skill set and to share their services. I wanted to ask, and I mean, anyone can answer this. I mean, I know that's an open question, but we know that we have a shortage of volunteers across this province, and I know that the fire services experience that, as well as other service providers in our province. And the expectation for us to roll something out, without any of the funding attached, and as well, with a low volunteer rate, how are we expecting to be able to, and I'm very optimistic, how are we expecting to be able to pull something together in a way that's going to help Nova Scotia? I mean, I know, you'll be able to explain a little bit more from the department side, but I just, I'm curious to know how that might look.
Mr. Mason with 120.
I think the two, certainly from my perspective, the two main things that will help inform how we can successfully implement the GARD are really these consultation processes will roll forward over the next several months. I think that is a great opportunity to kind of get ideas from a lot of these different stakeholders and also kind of vet them, some of the ideas as they move along. And I think the other thing, as I touched on in some of my earlier comments, is Nova Scotia is not alone in the scale and the frequency of events that we've seen, unfortunately. And a lot of these other jurisdictions are grappling with these problems and looking at similar mechanisms for solutions. These types of civilian-based, volunteer workforces can deliver a lot of value. Ontario's moved a lot on that front, as Quebec is undertaking now. So that can also kind of help inform those consultations. So we're not inventing it from, a point of zero. Like, we can look at best practices from other jurisdictions, move forward with the consultations, and have that inform what the final construct may look like here in Nova Scotia.
Emily Hanson with 10 seconds.
Communication is key, and that is the key to making things successful. So.
Time is running out. Thank you. Back to the PC caucus. Emily McDonald has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to get back to my question since my preamble, and this will be towards one of the RCMP members. So has the RCMP utilized the direct access that's been given to them for the Alert Ready system? And if so, how has that impacted response?
Mr. Byrne.
We've used it quite a bit, I must say. We received full access, I think it was in August of 2021, and to date we've issued 25 alerts. Of those alerts, they've been vulnerable missing persons alerts, dangerous persons alerts, serious incident alerts, and we've issued an Amber Alert. So we do issue them when needed. How does it affect response? We take the request to issue an alert from the frontline members who are constantly assessing the need for an alert, as well as our risk managers who are sitting in our communication center with the overarching most current information, and we take that and we judge that against keeping the public safe, and we will utilize it when necessary.
Thank you. Emily Taggart.
Thank you very much, Chair. And before I start my questioning, I just really got to say that our rural fire brigades, and they're very well represented here today from Colchester County for sure. I just have to say, a great big thank you. I go from, I have 25 years in the fire services, 20 years since I was involved in it. And the way that the challenges that you folks have taken on from what was really basically firefighting back in, say, 1993 or 4 or whatever, to the medical first responders, to the responding to floods. Our communities turn to the volunteer fire brigade members in time of need every single time. And I don't know where we would be without you folks. And, I guess one of the great things about that, and I was thinking about that, reflecting on the GARD, is it's folks that have been doing this because that's where their heart takes them or whatever, right? They passionately want to support their community, and so I believe that the GARD will be successful with the successful cooperation between the folks that have been doing this for years and the GARD, the government, that sort of thing. I just need to say that. And I'm sure people that don't live in the country can really realize the value of the volunteer fire brigades and the mutual aid system and all that. So I want to get that on the record. So my first question is just a quick one, I guess, to the RCMP. I just want to confirm. So in the case of an emergency alert, the staff sergeant has the authority to issue that immediately, without somebody reviewing it, without somebody, checking the wording and that sort of thing? Is that something that can go out like, say, like that?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes, the authority to issue alert has been delegated down to our risk managers. Based on the information that they have the ability to immediately issue an alert. So if you thought of, or if you think of an active shooter, they're going to obtain as much information on the subject, a location, etc., and based on their, years of experience, the training they received, they would issue that alert. Of course, it's not oversight. They will get, this is probably the supervisor, who's the OCC supervisor sitting next to them, to review the wording to make sure it's clear and concise. And we also have templates that we'll use to send out alerts rather quickly in the event that our strategic communications people aren't around. So if it's an immediate alert that's got to go out, we can just pull right from that.
Emily Taggart.
So I think there's a difference between the staff sergeant on duty and the risk manager, right? So is the staff sergeant able to make that, do that alert? Without, that's the $1 million question.
Mr. Byrne.
Yes, the staff sergeant is our risk managers in the OCC, and they have the authority to issue those alerts.
Thank you very much. Emily Taggart.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So this is to the RCMP as well. Has the RCMP worked to improve relationships with other police agencies to enhance public safety? And can you share any examples of that?
Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've done quite a bit in that. Over the last number of years, we've certainly seen a lot more interoperability with our external partners. We've had, when it comes to the policing side, we've had several large joint operations in policing for like the takedowns or seizures. We've worked with our external partners on the large-scale natural disasters such as the fires and the floods, and they were all utilized by using incident command system and unified command. So we would have representatives of the RCMP in those areas as well. We've done a lot of, a lot around interoperability for the radio system, so that we ensure that we have clear and concise communications with all the policing partners. We conduct weekly interoperability tests and secure testing with encrypted radios with every municipal police agency in the province, as well as the larger dispatch centers in the province, being Cape Breton, Halifax, and Shubenacadie Radio, as well as some other external partners. We also do quite a bit of joint training. Our emergency response team in the division has been doing a lot of training, not just with Halifax Regional Police Emergency Response Team, but we've also just recently conducted several ERT team leaders course, training course. It was for a week long, and we had representatives from Newfoundland RCMP, New Brunswick RCMP, Halifax Nova Scotia RCMP, Halifax Regional Police, Fredericton Police, Royal Newfoundland Constabulary. So they were all here, part of that training. And with that was it ended with the several days of scenario-based training to ensure the interoperability. Went very, very well and very well received by all these other policing agencies around the region. So we do a lot that way. And I must say that we don't have full interoperability, or the emergency response team doesn't have full interoperability with Halifax Regional Police, but they're very interoperable with them. Halifax Regional Emergency Response quite often would assist our emergency response team for calls within the province of Nova Scotia, and especially in around the HRM. So there's a lot we do there, and then there's our my emergency management unit conducts extensive ICS training, instant command system training at different levels, ground search and rescue, instant commanders training, and we always open that up to our external partners, our federal partners and provincial partners, the local GSAR teams, our volunteer fire departments, etc. So there's a lot of interoperability that we have, and that's one of our big focuses the last number of years, is have increased that interoperability with all of our external partners, not just police. So.
MLA Taggart with 128 left.
Thank you very much. And so with 128 left, I'll go to EMO and just like to give a wrap up, I guess, on how does the new legislation, Bill 455, strengthen the province's response to emergencies and work better with municipalities?
Sure.
Mr. Mason.
I think the value that the new legislation can bring, and it really even kind of builds on some of the points that the RCMP was making, is that interoperability, that partnership with our various partners. Municipal is key. With other departments is key. A lot of our legislation is dated, so I think updating that legislation along with the larger capacity the department can bring to the table, I think will better position EMO, the province generally, so that we can operate as effectively amongst the various departments. We have some that we work with more closely than others, such as natural resources, and of course with our municipal partners. So I think that's where we can gain value and be better prepared through this work.
20 seconds left, MLA Taggart.
Thank you, everyone. Maybe is there anybody at the fire service like to finish up a comment on what they'd like to see out of the Guard?
Time's up. Sorry, MLA Taggart. Time has come to an end for the questioning, so I'll go back to the witnesses and ask if any of you have any closing remarks, briefly. Mr. Nielsen?
So just briefly, thank you very much for everyone for ability to be here and collaborate. So one of the key things that we look at the fire service is education, right from top to bottom on how things work, including the alert system and how EMO works, right down to our grassroots, back up through to, we even have a federal HUSAR team here in Halifax. How do we get activated? How do the municipalities do all that stuff? So one thing to address the alert system, we as FSANS do not support fire chiefs having direct access. We want to go through the other channels. And as far as the NS Guard, we believe the consultation will be a key to how this unfolds. We look at it in a positive light. So in the end, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Canning, I believe you put your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just one very brief comment I want to make. We, in reviewing the material for this discussion, it appeared as though a major piece of it was the Alert Ready program and so on. And so there's one piece of that I do want to comment on and ask Mr. Mason to take it away with him, if he will. And that is the fact that we do not seem to have, and I stand to be corrected, we do not seem to have any method for ending an emergency alert. We have a very robust system to get them out there, and I think I've heard all 25 that Mr. Byrne mentioned that they've issued over the last few years, but we rarely seem to get a notice that it's finished. And I would note the most recent one in the community of Bible Hill, I think it was last week, where there was an armed individual wandering around the community. We got the alert and everybody locked down and so on and so forth. And within an hour, the incident apparently was closed, but I learned that through listening to CBC radio. So I think we need to close the loop, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further closing remarks? Well, as chair of the committee, I want to thank you for your time. Also, as a first responder myself, I truly appreciate everything you folks do on a daily basis, and I appreciate the questioning from both sides of the floor here. They were open, honest, good questions, good for our community. So with that, we'll call a 5-minute recess so you folks can leave, and we'll come back for closing business. Thank you. order. Call the committee back to order. So with committee business, we have a letter that's been passed out. Deputy Minister Justin Houston has responded to 3 requests for information regarding a decrease in total number of funded projects, the impact of Nourishing Communities food coupon program, and the number of grants dedicated to supporting the 2S LGBTQIA+ community made as of February 6th community service meeting. Is there any questions or discussion on that? Good to move forward. And the next topic is the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. They were supposed to be at the meeting today, and I think we all know what happened there. Is there any conversation, any comments? Are we okay with that? Just wanted to give you opportunity to speak on it, right? Because it was, I think it was NDP topic, right? I think it was, so I wanted to bring forward. Okay, any other business? Emily Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make a motion for you as chair to write the National Minister for an update on that Alert Ready review.
Okay. Thank you. Questions on the motion? Ready to vote on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Count your mind. Motion approved. Emily Jessup.
I'll start with a question because perhaps one of the government members can answer it before I make a motion. The consultations that are taking place with respect to the EMO and the Nova Scotia Guard, will there be a report that gets produced publicly at the end of consultations through the chair to any of the members that might be able to answer that question?
I'll move it to the members first. Emily McDonald.
I would submit that I don't know. It just came out. I mean, that's why the bill was brought out, so there was plenty of consultation. I don't think anybody's going to know until the consultation is done what the process is. So I'm kind of confused for the question.
Emily Jessup.
Okay. Then through the chair, I move that the committee directs the chair to reach out to the minister responsible for EMO, inquiring about whether he intends to produce a public report on the information gathered during consultations on the EMO and Nova Scotia Guard.
You heard the motion. Emily Taggart.
Well, I expect that the results of the consultation will be in the legislation, and that would be my view on that. I think it'd be no different than any other legislation. I know that, yeah, thank you.
Emily Hanson.
Mr. Chair, and I think that's why the question's being asked, because it's not in legislation right now as it stands. So I think the piece of legislation that was brought forward wasn't very wholesome to give the information based on whether there was public information given at the end of the consultation. So I think that is just the ask, is making sure that all of the information that we receive via the consultation is transparent and open to public, so that there can be a viewing of what the Nova Scotia Guard will look like.
Emily McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just be honest, the motion kind of confuses me just because we have a bill that's, well, the House isn't sitting at this moment, that's there, that hasn't even gone to second reading. Yeah. We're now being asked to send a letter asking that something be done when consultation isn't even done. I think this is one of those, a horse above, because, thank you. It's weird they say that, because I don't understand that rationale, because the horse is supposed to be in front of the cart, but I digress. So for me, I can't support sending a message, sending a letter that's saying, okay, you're going to do this when a consultation's not done. It hasn't even really started. So that makes more sense. Cart before the horse. And when the bill was presented so that the consultation and discussions could be done. So I just think we're at this point, like, I think these are questions that can be asked by members if if they want to ask them thing, but I don't see the point of us issuing a letter directing, which is basically what you're asking, because this committee does not direct anybody other than to write letters onto it. So for me, I just can't support it because, you know, there is no consultation done. They're working it out. So that's my comment onto it. Thank you.
Before I go to MLA Taggart, I would ask all committee members to keep comments down so we can get through the rest of this speech. MLA Taggart.
I'll be very brief. I just, you know, I was sitting in the legislature and get accused of not consulting, and so something that this kind of, for me, significance and importance. I'm very happy that it was announced, and we have the whole summer to consult and kind of work it through, so that I think it was a wise thing to do. I don't know, Minister. I don't know. I have no idea why it was the way it is, but I can tell you, I'm very supportive of the idea that volunteer firefighters who will play a critical role in this have lots of time to iron out the bugs, so we're not back at it and that sort of thing. So I'm very happy with the way it is. Thank you.
MLA Jessom.
Yeah, I did not suggest that we're directing a minister. What I explicitly said was that we direct the chair to inquire about whether or not the minister intends to make a report on the consultations public. I'm not against consulting with any of the agencies. I think it's a reasonable and good idea to consult with these groups. What I'm asking, I think, and I thought it was pretty basic, you know, we've seen, you know, the DNR just produced a report that they made public in response to a situation. The government, in the last day of the legislative session, announced that they were going to do a round of consultations on this Nova Scotia Guard, and they've been very profound in saying that this is a great idea. All I'm asking is, does the minister intend to make the information that's gathered through consultation public in the form of a public report? It really doesn't. I'm not trying to be tricky. I'm trying to get a response as to whether or not this will be information that we'll be able to reflect upon as we go back to the legislature in the fall to debate what is supposed to be a fairly profound change to emergency management in the province. It's not cryptic, like, anyway.
MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For clarity, because I think this is a friendly ask. I don't think this is something that is being, and it's asking us to write a letter to just put this on the forefront so that folks can actually remember, because we know that, you know, sometimes legislation is put forward and we don't always have everything crossed and dotted. So what we're asking is just a friendly look, just to keep in mind that we can make sure that the information is public and transparent, because I think that's the value of what Nova Scotians want. And it's not, because I'm reading the act right now, I just read the bill, and in nowhere does it state that there be any public consultation or public information shared. And I think that is what we heard today, was about communication and things being shared openly so that everyone understands what that is. So I think, I don't want it to, because it doesn't necessarily need to be this long. I think it's just us asking of the chair to write a letter to make sure that this is not missed, that they can consider maybe possibly adding it within whatever they're doing through consultation, making it public so that folks can actually see and be involved in the work that is needed with the Nova Scotia Guard. Thank you.
MLA Taggart.
Well, yeah. So I just don't fully understand why we're doing this. I don't know that this is our place to start questioning, the lead up to every bill. Are we going to ask for, consultation or a report on every bill that comes before the legislature? I don't think that that's the place for. I don't think this committee is not the place for this. This committee is in my view. But anyway, I think it's a great bill. I think that the idea that that we've had we'll have all summer long through to the fall, or you know, to really to get out and understand and educate people on what's going on in such a critical kind of a...
Sorry, order. Time's up. Next meeting is June 4th. Topic is addressing the homeless crisis. Witnesses are Affordable Housing Association, Nova Scotia, Department of Community Services, Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care, Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency, and Shelter Nova Scotia. Meeting adjourned.